Hi all. So what we're going to do today is there has been a little bit of confusion around how we might plan an effective coaching session. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through how I would plan mine, and then I'll run through how that might look, but obviously without the responses of the person that I'd be coaching. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to give a practice-based coaching session example. The reason that I'll do this is just because it's slightly easier to plan the coaching. If anyone would like to see a product-based, so looking at someone's planning, then please let me know and I can make sure that I make one for that too. So, scenario is I've gone into a lesson and I've seen someone teach and I have realised that that person uses the same tone of voice all the way through their lesson. And when they're counting down from 5 to 1, they're still using that same tone of voice. So what I'm going to ask them to do is I'm going to ask them to use a more formal register, so a more formal tone of voice when counting down so that children understand they need to listen. So if I'm doing this, I'm going to look at the action step first. The reason that I look at the action step is so that I have an idea in mind of where I want to get to. If I know where I want to get to, then I can plan the rest of the session to meet this criteria. So I've got my action step in mind. However, and I'll write the bits in red here, I need to think about when I want them to do it, what I want them to do, and why I want them to do it. So I already said when counting down to gain attention. This is when I want them to do it, because she is counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What do I now want them to do? Use a formal register. Now I use the term register just because it's a shared language. If I use this in all of my coaching sessions and around school, then people will begin to know what I mean when I talk about the word register. So use a formal register so that children understand that it is time to listen and stop work. Okay, so I have my action step. This is what I'm going to base the rest of my coaching session on. So, quite fortuitously, the last session that I did with this person, their action step was to count down. So to use a countdown in order to get the attention of the children. That means my praise has to reflect that action step. So it builds from last week. So I'm planning my session. I'm going to talk about her previous goal. So last time we set the goal of counting down from 5 when getting the attention of the children. And now I've been to see her lesson, so that was the first thing that I was looking out for. So I'm going to make sure now that I say where I saw it, and I can see that you met it by the fact that you counted down when you wanted to do a plenary. And the children generally listened. Now, we know, don't we, that she hasn't really hit that action step in terms of it getting all of the children's attention. However, has she done what I'd asked her to do last week? Yes, she has. I asked her to count down and she did that. So she's met that because she definitely did it in her lesson. I then might say to her, and these are my stock phrases I use, how have you found it? Do you feel it has had an impact on your teaching? Now, depending on whether she says yes or no, I might then follow up with something. So if she said no, I might say, if you keep persevering with this, as well as today's action step, you would definitely see a positive impact on your teaching. I'd be interested to know what you say after next week. So that's all the praises. It's going over last week. Now I'm going to look at probe. Now the probe, as we know from before, is looking at finding the gap. So looking at how we might uncover the gap in that teacher's thinking about the pedagogy or just what they're not necessarily doing, so the things that they don't realise they're doing in a lesson. I always introduce it in the same way. The part of the lesson I want to talk about today is how you introduce material to the pupils. Well, actually, this is an old one. It's not what I want to do. The part of the lesson I want to talk about today is how you made sure the pupils knew that it was time to stop when you counted down. Now, I know that video is my best friend here, because most likely, if I'm giving action steps like this teacher is going to believe that they have got the attention of all their children. So I want to show her that actually she hasn't. So I'm going to say, let me show you a video, and I want you to focus on, and what do I want her to focus on? It's important to give a focus question so that she's looking at the right things, because actually, when you look at a video of yourself as a teacher, we're so self-reflective that half the time we just look at the things that we're doing wrong, and I don't want her to concentrate on 10 things that she's doing wrong. I just want her to focus on getting the children's attention. So let me show you a video, and I want you to focus on how many children followed your instruction after you counted down from 5. Now that's very specific. For some people I might not be as specific, but actually this is definitely what I want her to concentrate on. After she's watched the video, so I've presented to her what she's done. I then might say, what do you notice? I don't have to say this, but I always find it's useful to just get an initial reflection from the teacher. So what do you notice about what it was that you did? She might say, about 20 of them were paying attention. I'll say, yeah, of course. So let me show you a model of how it could look so we can make sure that we are getting 30 of those children's attention. So let me show you how it could look, and I'm now going to do my model. Now, in this case, my model is how I say things. So I'm going to do her countdown, but I'm going to do it in a formal register. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Arms folded, eyes on me. That is my model. I've now presented that to her. So I've shown her what she did. I've shown her my model. Now, I want to probe the gap. So I want to probe if she knows what's different between mine and hers. Well, the point I want to get to is the point where she says, you were speaking in a slightly different way than me. So I might say, what's the difference between mine and yours? And she might say, you were louder. She's kind of halfway there. She's understood that actually what I'm looking at is the tone. It's the register of her voice. However, it's not necessarily that I'm just louder, because a misconception here would be that I shout 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is definitely not what we want. So I might say, and this is me thinking of questions that I might want to back it up with, what did you notice about the way that I spoke? Did I shout? At this point, I might want to say either, why did I do it this way? Or what I might want to do is I might want to give an explanation. So I'm going to have an explanation ready. Oh, let's go back to there, sorry. I did the countdown in a formal register. This is a more direct and commanding tone of voice that I use when I want children's attention. it is different from when I am presenting material in a more conversational tone. Because I am in charge and I need people to listen to me. Now, it's always useful to understand actually at what point that teacher is at. So at this point, I might say to that teacher, what is the impact going to be on your classroom if you use a formal register when counting down? I might then say something along the lines of, how would you know it's been successful? What I don't want to do here is make this person feel stupid. So if they get it straight away, they say, "Oh, you're using a more formal tone of voice because I know, because then they know to listen to you." I don't want to then keep asking them questions around the same thing, which will make them feel like a little bit silly, because it's not that necessarily that hard a thing. And some people will get it straight away. The idea of the probe is that if they're there, explain why you've asked them to do that, and then move on to the action step. Now, if you look, the thread from the part of the lesson finishes at the perfect time where I can say, great, with that in mind, your action step is, when counting down to gain attention, use a formal register so that children understand that it is time to listen and stop working. Sometimes when you're planning, you might realise that what you first thought was your action step is not actually your action step. That's fine, but it does mean that you have to go back and replan your probe. Now, we've got to our action step, we've delivered it. I want that person to write it down, because when they leave my coaching session, I want them to be able to look at it and concentrate on that. And that is it for a whole week. I want them only to work on their formal register, because when I come in at exactly the same time next week, that is what I'll be looking for. I'm then going to practice what perfect looks like, and I use this again. So I'm going to practice. Now, the big misconception around this is that they need to do something totally different. Get them to practice your exact model. Exactly what you introduced first, get them to practice that. So let's practice what perfect looks like, and I might model it once more. Okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Folded arms, eyes on me. I will then ask that person to stand up as if they are in their own classroom. Which means that when you're modelling yours and when you're showing her what you would do, you also need to stand up so that it doesn't feel as if you're imposing this on that person. And they might do it, and they might do it really well. If they do it really well, fantastic, but don't let them off the hook. Because deliberate practice is the best way to get automatic change in a teacher. So I want them to go away and not even have to think about using the formal register. They'll just do it. So they might do it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fantastic. I can see that you can do it. Let's do it again for automaticity so that it feels really natural. And I would make them do it again and again. Alternatively, what's really easy to do is that they might do it pathetically and we let them get away with it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so at this point, I would say, I can still see that you're doing your countdown. However, concentrate on being really formal and direct in what you're saying. Stop them as soon as they're wrong and make them do it again. And I follow this pattern. So let me stop you for a second. I like how you're counting down and you're starting using informal register, but I want you to think about slowing down your speech so that you give them time to put their pens down and that you're leaving enough pause between each number. They might then go again, and they might go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Great, I'm going to stop you once more. I like how you started slowly, but you sped up as you went through. So let's do it again. And I want you to concentrate on the pauses between every single number. and I would make them do it again. The practice is the most important part, because if you don't practice it to the point of perfection, they won't do it perfectly in class. And that's when it starts to fall apart. So practice has to be perfect. You can spend as long as you want on the practice, depending on time restraints, of course, but it's a really useful tool in changing teachers' practice. Plan ahead, not necessarily as prevalent, as useful, should I say, in terms of a practice-based session, but I would still say, let's take a look at an upcoming lesson and tell me at what points in the lesson you might need to count them down. So when you're introducing a task, when you're stopping them for a mini plenary. So ask them when they might be using it in their class, and then say, when can I come up and see you next? This is just logistics, but that is how I would plan my whole session. Don't feel bad about going into a coaching session with the notes in front of you, because you in the time frame you have, you can't just memorize everything. So if we go back to the top, I'll just run through how this might look up to the end of the action step. And let's see if we've got the thread correct. So last time we set the goal of counting down from 5 and getting the attention of the children. And I can see that you met it by the fact that you counted down when you wanted to do a plenary and the children generally listened. How have you found it? Do you think that it's had an impact on your teaching? Yeah, I can understand that. And I think the longer that you do it, the more impact you will see it have as it becomes embedded in the routines of the children. And what we're looking at today will hopefully help with embedding that as well. So the part of the lesson I do want to talk about today is how you made sure the pupils knew that it was time to stop when you counted down. So let me show you a video, and I want you to focus on how many children followed your instruction after you counted down from 5. Video starts. Video stops. Okay, so what did you notice? Yeah, there were 4 or 5 children that carried on writing, and that might be just because they were excited about doing the work. But when we count down, we want to make sure every single child stops and listens, don't we? So let me show you a model of how it could look. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Arms folded, eyes on me. Thank you. So what did you notice was the difference between mine and yours? Yeah, my voice was a bit louder. It definitely was a bit louder when I was counting down. Do you think it was necessarily just louder? Was I shouting? No, I wasn't. And why do you think it is I did it that way? It was to gain their attention, definitely. So the reason I did the countdown in a formal register, which is what this is called, is that it is more direct and commanding. It's a tone of voice that I want to use when I want the children's attention. It doesn't mean I shout, but it does mean that I'm slower, more measured, and more direct in what I'm saying. It's different from when I'm presenting in a more conversational tone, because I am in charge and I need people to listen to me. So what do you think the impact would be if you use that as well as your countdown in your lesson? Yeah, exactly. You're going for a much higher level of compliance, aren't you? And how would you know that you've been successful? So as an indicator to yourself, how would you know that that's successful? 100% compliance, yeah. So with that in mind, your action step is, when counting down to gain attention, use a formal register so that children understand that it is time to listen and stop working. Can you write that down for me, please? And repeat that back. Great, thank you.